Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Leighton today for our webinar, Design for Dollars, Energy Efficient Designs That Pay. We'll get started in just a minute, but while we wait to kick off, please let us know where you're joining us from in the chat.
All right. Hello and welcome to Design for Dollars, Energy Efficient Designs That Pay. If you're not familiar with us, we are Leighton USA. We're an international tax consulting firm. We operate in 17 different countries worldwide, and we focus on niche tax incentives that CPAs either might not be aware of or aren't qualified to handle themselves. My name is Sean Reville. I'm Leighton's Senior 45L Tax Consultant. I've been in building and residential energy efficiency for 7 years now. And ever since I've joined Leighton, we've been able to get our clients over $7 million in 45L tax credits. And with that, I'll let Ethan introduce himself.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. My name is Ethan Clifford. I'm a 45L consultant here at Leighton. I have over 5 years experience in the energy rating industry, helping single family and multifamily projects achieve Energy Star, HERS, Zero Energy Ready Homes, and PHIUS, or Passive House certifications. Thanks, Sean.
All right. So before we get into it, I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but last week they released some news that there were some reports that Energy Star's department that it's under in the EPA is going to be eliminated going forward. Nothing official has been released, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Like, for example, over 60 US and Canadian jurisdictions use the Energy Star portfolio manager for energy benchmarking. Over 90% of the nation's 25 largest home builders have built to Energy Star standards, and over 330,000 commercial properties use the EPA's Energy Star portfolio manager. All that is to say is that Energy Star is deeply ingrained into the economy at large. So even if something happens at the EPA, it's our opinion that Energy Star is not going to go away anywhere soon. We just wanted to give you guys that news update since that just was released last week, and before we kind of get into the rest of our presentation. So the agenda for today is we're going to be talking about 45L and a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act. Then we're going to be talking about Energy Star incentives in design, specifically focused on Energy Star multifamily. Similarly, we're going to get into Zero Energy Ready Homes design and incentives, once again focusing on multifamily projects. And then we're going to kind of talk about a couple other incentives that you may or may not be aware of that kind of complement multifamily building. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So the 45L tax credit. Have you claimed the 45L tax credit since 2023? Please answer the poll in the chat box. All right. If you're not familiar with it, the 45L Energy Efficient Home Tax Credit is a tax credit for builders, contractors, and developers who are building residential homes that meet certain energy efficiency thresholds. We kind of break it up into pre-Inflation Reduction Act and post-Inflation Reduction Act because the requirements were quite different. For single-family buildings and multifamily buildings up to 3 stories tall placed into service before 2023, there is a $2,000 per unit tax credit if it meets certain energy efficiency thresholds. Specifically, it needs to be 50% more efficient heating and cooling loads compared to 2006 IECC. With the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, they changed up the requirements. So now you need to either get Energy Star certified, which gives you a credit up to $2,500 per unit, or DOE Zero Energy Ready Home certified, which gives you up to $5,000 per unit. And with that, they also got rid of the height limit for multifamily buildings. So multifamily buildings can be of any size now. So when you're thinking of what buildings can qualify for the 45L, affordable housing, apartment buildings, certain assisted living facilities, condos, dorms, townhomes, duplexes, single family homes, pretty much anywhere that somebody can list on their tax forms that they live there as a residence can qualify for the 45L tax credit. So legacy 45L, that pre-Inflation Reduction Act one, as we mentioned, it's $2,000 per dwelling unit. You can actually still claim the 45L tax credit for any buildings that were placed into service in 2022, 2021, by claiming through an open tax year. So you can go back and amend your taxes for those years to still claim the 45L credit if it meets the energy efficiency requirements. That being said, it still needs a third party to do the energy modeling and on-site inspections to verify what's in the energy model was actually installed in site. So we're going to take a minute here. This is kind of an overview of all of the incentives amount for the 45L tax credit. An important thing to look at over here is just that you'll notice that the multifamily program has different amounts, whether or not prevailing wage is being paid. If you're not familiar with prevailing wage, it is calculated by the federal government. And for that specific county, what is the fair price for a government project? So it's usually a higher premium than what the normal rates are, but it's dependent on the county and the project type. So it's a 5 times multiplier for multifamily buildings. Meanwhile, single family buildings do not have to pay prevailing wage to get the full credit amounts. All right, so we're going to dig into the Energy Star multifamily new construction program and some of its incentives. Have you built an Energy Star certified project before? Please answer in the chat box. All right. Energy Star multifamily new construction is actually kind of a newer program for Energy Star. Energy Star certified homes started in 1995. There was nothing specifically for multifamily programs until 2014 when they created the Energy Star multifamily high-rise program. But they phased that out when they introduced the Energy Star multifamily new construction program. I want to emphasize that this is not the Energy Star portfolio or benchmarking program. Multifamily buildings before this program could actually get Energy Star certified through that. Totally different thing, not eligible for the 45L tax credit. So the Energy Star multifamily new construction program applies to all multifamily buildings with the exceptions of townhomes and duplexes. That is because the EPA now considers those single family homes, at least for the Energy Star program. There is an exception for assisted living facilities. So assisted living facilities that have a trained nurse on staff, any medical facilities on site, and are actually like helping residents in and out of their individual residential units actually don't qualify for the Energy Star program. And then mixed use buildings that are over 50% commercial cannot qualify for the Energy Star building. So at least 50% of the entire building, if it's a mixed use building, has to either be residential or servicing the residential units in the building to still be eligible for this program. So you may be wondering why even bother get Energy Star certified? Well, as we mentioned, the 45L tax credit is $500 per unit without prevailing wage, and that gets up to $2,500 per unit with prevailing wage. If you are using any sort of HUD loans, HUD has a green mortgage insurance premium program, which will reduce your mortgage insurance premium rate by 40 to 50 basis points. There's also the Fannie Mae green certification preferential pricing program. And in that, Energy Star Multifamily version 1.2 qualifies as a Group 2 certification, which gets you a 10 to 15 basis points reduction on your mortgage. Getting Energy Star certified can increase how much of your building is CPACE eligible, if that's a route that you're looking into. There's increased resale values, so Energy Star buildings get a premium of up to 6% in increased resale values. And then energy savings. If you're buying or if you're building and holding these buildings and you're going to be the one paying the utilities, Energy Star buildings use on average 20% less energy. All right, so we're going to kind of talk through the process of getting the building Energy Star certified. The first thing we have to decide is which modeling pathway do we want to go down to. So the first option is you can do the prescriptive pathway, which actually doesn't even do any energy modeling. You just look at what's in the multifamily workbook, and it has all of the materials for all the different assemblies and what R values or U values you need to hit. So you could just go off of that and do it exactly as it's in the workbook. There is the ERI pathway, which is the energy modeling pathway that's required by the single family homes program. In our case, we use HERS energy modeling for the residential units, which will give us a target score somewhere between 0, which it would be considered net zero, and 100, which is considered 2006 IECC. And usually the scores are somewhere in the mid 40s to 50s that you have to hit. And how you do that is totally flexible and up to the builder to decide on. And then you have to do prescriptive in the common areas. And then the final option is the ASHRAE pathway, which uses ASHRAE 90.1 to model the entire building. So that includes the common spaces as well as the residential units. So Energy Star version 1.1 is the version that is currently required. If you're completing a building today, that's what you would have to meet to be eligible for the 45L tax credit. It's prescriptive and ERI pathways compare the building to a 2012 IECC building. And then if you're going the ASHRAE pathway, it's 15% more efficient than ASHRAE 2016 is the requirements there. For version 1.2, the prescriptive and ERI are compared to 2021 IECC. ASHRAE has to be 15% more efficient than 2019 ASHRAE. And the version 1.2 is going to be required for all buildings completed in 2027. So if you're thinking about your time cycles are going to be 18 months to a year, and you want to claim the 45L tax credit, 18 months to 2 years, you might want to start consider just building to version 1.2 now, because that's, by the time you complete it, that'll be the version eligible for the 45L tax credit. All right, we're going to get into the next important component, which is on-site inspections. So on-site inspections can be done with sampling. So to prevent any interference with the building schedule, they allow us to sample units. So you don't need to look at every single unit. You just need to look at one out of 5, and they clump them together based on unit types. So if units are within 10% of the same amount of square feet, the same number of bedrooms, and the same number of floors within the units, then they're all considered the same unit type and are eligible under the sampling process. So there's 2 required inspections, though you can opt to do more. There's 2 that are required no matter what, which is the pre-drywall and the final test out. At the pre-drywall, we're looking at duct quality. So are the ducts being installed without any kinks or bends or anything that would reduce airflow? And then we're also going to do duct leakage testing, which is basically setting up a blower door fan, just a mini version, onto the duct system alone to see where air leakage is in the ducts. You don't have to do that at pre-drywall, but most people prefer to, because it gives you more access to the ducts to be able to seal them if they're too leaky or something like that. We're also going to be grading insulation. So Energy Star requires all buildings have insulation rated to grade 1 with a couple of exceptions. Grade 1 insulation means it's installed with minimal gaps. If it's fiberglass, it's not, or mineral wool, it's not compressed in any way. And then we're also going to be just looking at air sealing details to the outside and making sure air sealing is done between units, and also looking at the framing to see if there's any advanced framing techniques being used, which can help with the overall energy efficiency of the building. Finally, we do a final test out, usually close to when the building is going to go for CO or TCO. One of the big tests is the compartmentalization test, which is a blower door test on the residential units. And there's only a certain amount of leakage that's allowed both to the outside and in between the individual units, which is why the air sealing inspection being done at the pre-drywall stage is very important. We're also going to be doing ventilation testing. So all units have to meet ASHRAE 62.2 to qualify for Energy Star. In addition to that, kitchen fans and bath fans have to have minimum flow ratings and exhaust that air to the outside. So we'll be testing both of those. HVAC testing is actually going to be done by a third entity, which is going to be a functional testing agent. It's either somebody who's a very well credentialed HVAC technician or a professional engineer. Then finally, we're going to be looking at lighting for LEDs and at appliances just to see how efficient they are.
And Sean, if I could just jump in and circle back on the compartmentalization testing. Here in Massachusetts, I've worked with several GCs who have sort of gone ahead of the curve and purchased their own blower door equipment and started sort of testing out their multifamily projects and the units within the project to see where they stand. Another option would be having a rater like myself or Sean come out there and sort of get like a midpoint test to see if you guys are on track to meeting the compartmentalization target. So I think those are good considerations moving forward.
Definitely. How often would you say on the first blower door test there needs to be some improvements done to be able to pass, in your experience?
I think it depends on experience of the GC, but I think initially probably 9 times out of 10. So it's very important to get your eyes on the leakage points and try to diagnose anything as early as possible before everything's boarded up, taped, mudded, sealed up, and everything.
Thanks, Ethan. That's great advice. So finally, is the final step is that the buildings officially gets certified. So there's a lot of checklists that we're doing as Energy Star raters. Some of the checklists, like the HVAC design checklist, needs to be filled out by your mechanical designer. The functional testing checklist gets filled out by the functional testing agent. And just because nobody's relying strictly on our word, everything that we're checking in when we're doing these on-site inspections, we are taking photo evidence, taking pictures for photo evidence to back up that, yes, this building is really being built to these Energy Star standards. And even more so is there's always a QA review. So it's either going to be done by a multifamily review organization who looks at prescriptive path and ASHRAE projects, or a provider through a home certification organization who will be looking at anything done under the ERI pathway. And they're going to check 10% of all of our energy models and compare them with the plans, as well as 1% of all on-site inspections. They actually tag along and shadow you on. So lots of layers of quality control in this process. Finally, the building gets certified. It actually gets registered with the MLS in addition to the EPA and DOE. So that way, people, when they're looking at these buildings and assessing them, they are valuing the energy efficiency of it, which is legally required by assessors. They have to value homes that get these green certifications more so than homes and buildings that do not. So there have been some recent changes to Energy Star. Starting January 15th this year, they released some new revisions. One of the most important changes is they changed Section 3, which was the reduced thermal bridging section, and took it from being mandatory to making it optional. As raters, we still have to go on site and inspect for these items, but you will not fail the program if you don't pursue these items. So one of the items that used to be required was advanced framing techniques if you weren't using continuous exterior insulation. So that would be doing California corners, insulating headers, making sure wall intersections you're able to insulate the thermal envelope completely where interior walls meet the exterior walls, thermal breaks between all interior and exterior slabs, and slab edge insulation. So all of that used to be required. If you missed any one of those steps, you would completely fail the program. They're now optional. They did change some of the builder verifications, trying to improve the workflow so there aren't any more delays from inspections. And officially, townhomes are considered single family. So what does Energy Star consider a townhome? If the unit has a slab or basement, it has an attic or roof above it and 2 exposed sides, then it is considered a townhome and therefore single family. So that means, a lot of townhomes are now single family, but something like a triple decker, which is more common in New England, wouldn't qualify as a single family home. The air sealing requirements were streamlined, and they removed some of the exemptions that stucco was able to get if you were using stucco siding. And right now, these changes are optional, but starting 2026, they're going to be mandatory. So we kind of went through and just made some like green flags and red flags for what's an ideal project, or if you're not familiar with the program and you're considering, would my project be eligible for Energy Star or not? These are some things where if you have 1 or 2 of either the green flags or red flags, you should consider pursuing Energy Star or maybe not. So as I mentioned earlier, version 1.2 of Energy Star is comparing the home to 2021 IECC. So if you're in a jurisdiction that already requires that, you're probably not going to have to make any significant changes to be eligible for Energy Star. Similarly, if you're already using any type of continuous insulation, whether that's a foam board or maybe like using structurally insulated panels, SIP paneling, all of that is a great sign that you're going to pass energy modeling without too many problems because you have prevented any thermal bridging from the studs. If you're not familiar with energy recovery ventilation or heat recovery ventilation, both are really useful for meeting those ASHRAE 62.2 requirements without taking a hit on the energy modeling compared to exhaust-only ventilation. They basically exhaust air out, bring fresh air in, and recover some of the energy in that process that might have been lost. High-efficiency heat pumps, particularly in the colder climate zones, heat pump technology has gotten a lot better, and using high-efficiency heat pumps can be up to like a 10-point swing in the energy modeling process, which is very significant. That being said, you can definitely still pass energy modeling and everything if you are using a high efficiency furnace, so at least 95% AFUE. And then finally, heat pump water heaters always perform very well in energy modeling. Some red flags where if you're hitting a couple of these, you might not want to consider Energy Star because you're probably not going to pass it. Electric resistance heating, even in the warmest warm climates, always is really performs really poorly in energy models. While electric resistance heating is technically 100% efficient, it's the most expensive way to heat a place, and compared to heat pumps these days that are 2 to almost 500% efficient, they're just not that good. Package terminal air conditioners are another one that if I see them on any plans, I kind of know they're going to be a long way off from passing Energy Star. One, they're not very efficient. usually. 2, because they go through a giant hole in the wall. They tend to be very leaky, makes it hard to pass the compartmentalization test. And 3, because they tend to go through a hole in the wall, you now have a giant uninsulated hole in your wall compared to the R15 or R21 insulation that you'd normally have. So all around, they really hurt energy models, and it's very hard to pass this program using them. As I kind of mentioned earlier, kitchen ventilation is required, and it is required that it is vented to the outside. So you cannot use recirculating kitchen fans and still meet Energy Star. So that's a pretty big cost that if you're not already planning on it, can kind of make the financial decision for you that Energy Star is not going to be for you. As I mentioned, slab edge is not required anymore, but it is really hard, especially in climate zones 4 and up, to pass Energy Star without slab edge insulation. And then finally, code minimum windows. Windows are always going to be one of the most impactful parts of an energy model, because even a relatively efficient window, something that has like a U value of 0.25, that's only equivalent to R4 compared to your walls, which are going to be R15 or R21. So even if you are using code minimum windows, or better windows, you should consider how much of the wall space is going to be covered in windows, because that has a really big outsized impact on the model. Once you get to a 30% window to wall ratio, you have a lot of trouble meeting the Energy Star requirements. So how many of you have used green flags in any of your current or recent projects? Please answer in the chat. All right, with that, I will hand it over to Ethan to talk about zero energy ready homes.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. So I'll be talking about zero energy ready homes, designs, and incentives, particularly the multifamily program. So a little bit of background about the Zero Energy Ready Homes program. It's a green building certification program offered by the Department of Energy. It was introduced in 2013, and it focuses on high performance residential new construction, and it incorporates energy efficient mechanical equipment, thermal envelope, windows, renewable energy, water efficiency, and indoor air quality. For the sake of this presentation, I'll be focusing on multifamily version 2, as projects that were permitted after January 1st of this year will have to hit multifamily version 2 of zero energy ready homes to receive the 45L tax credit. So zero energy ready homes, as mentioned before, is a route to securing the 45L tax credit. Builders can receive up to $1,000 per unit, as well as $5,000 per unit if meeting prevailing wage requirements. However, like I said before, you must be meeting the most recent zero energy ready homes version. Like I said before, after January 1st of this year, multifamily version 2 revision 1. And if you have any projects coming up in January of 2026 or later, it must be multifamily version 2 revision 2. So similar to Energy Star, there are 3 pathways to receiving certification: the ERI, ASHRAE, and prescriptive. The key differences here between zero energy ready homes and Energy Star is that the ERI model, or the target for your ERI model, is a little bit lower than the Energy Star ERI, which just means you need to incorporate more energy efficient trade-offs to reach that score. For the ASHRAE pathway, instead of having a 15% or more savings versus ASHRAE 90.1, you need it 20% or greater. The prescriptive pathway is very similar to Energy Star in the sense where you need to hit a list of prescriptive items. It's sort of like the least flexible option. However, it's a clear-cut list of items you need to check off. And with that, there's an additional checklist the rater would be required to complete. So what are the mandatory requirements? Well, the mandatory requirements can be sort of split into 3 sections. We have the co-requisite certifications, the as-built conditions, and components for future electrification. The co-requisite certifications are Energy Star Multifamily version 1.2, as well as Indoor Air Plus version 1 or version 2, depending on your permit date. The as-built conditions include having all HVAC ductwork and equipment within conditioned space. Your thermal envelope and windows and doors need to be or meet or exceed the 2021 IECC requirements. If you are located in climate zones 6 through 8, you'll be required to have a heat recovery ventilation unit or an energy recovery ventilation unit. You also are required to have Energy Star certified appliances, as well as 100% LED lights in the project. The additional items I have listed, I will be covering in upcoming slides, especially for future electrification requirements. So we'll get to those shortly. Oh, Sean, I see you speaking,
Yes.
but I can't hear you.
Thanks, Ethan. I just wanted to jump in and talk about the requirement for having the ductwork within conditioned space, just because I know for a lot of builders that actually is a reason to not pursue zero energy ready homes. There are some exemptions, particularly if you're using spray foam insulation, where you can put them into places that are not conditioned. And similarly, actually, there is a company I've seen recently, I believe they're based in Arizona, that has actually created a ductwork system specifically to meet zero requirements to make sure that all their ducts stay in conditioned space. So it sounds strict, but there are a lot of ways to be compliant with that requirement that you may not be aware of.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. So regarding some of the for future electrification requirements, one of those is a PV ready requirement. So PV stands for photovoltaic or solar panels. And you do not need solar panels installed. However, you need to be ready for future installation. And with that, there are requirements around preparing for that installation. So one of those items is having a solar ready zone. Your solar ready zone is where you will be placing those solar panels. That area must be no less than 40% of the roof area and can't be less than 5 feet in width, and it has to be free of obstructions like HVAC piping, refrigerant lines, things like that. Additionally, you'll need a conduit running from your main electric service panel all the way to your solar ready zone or roof in this case, as well as construction documents indicating these requirements as well. Additionally, you'll need a certificate, preferably posted near your main electric service panel that indicates the requirements mentioned before. However, there are exemptions. If more than 75% of your roof area is shaded, or if you already have PV installed on site or solar installed on site, if you have too steep of a roof pitch, or if it's exempted by a licensed professional. Another electrification ready requirement is around electric vehicle ready. So at least 20% of your parking spaces for your project should be EV capable, EV ready, or have electric vehicle service equipment installed. EV capable is having a raceway from your panel to, let's say, a junction box, and it has to be within 6 feet of your parking space. EV ready is taking that step to the next level and actually having a branch circuit or outlet installed within 6 feet of your parking space. And then having electric vehicle service equipment installed is having that charger installed, ready to charge vehicles on site. There are exemptions with this as well. If there is no parking provided on site, or one that I thought was interesting is if your electric provider cannot supply 100% of the required power, you may be required to sort of install the maximum amount. So instead of 20%, maybe it's 15 or 10%. And also there is an additional exemption if the cost to operate increases by $450 per unit. The final sort of electrification ready requirement is based around heat pump HVAC systems and heat pump hot water heaters. If you are using combustion heating or a combustion hot water heater, you must install a conduit or branch circuit or outlet within 3 feet of the equipment that indicates for future installation of heat pump HVAC system or heat pump hot water heater system. With this, there are also exemptions, and the exemptions here are if you are already using electric hot water heater systems or heat pump HVAC systems. I also wanted to touch on the Indoor Air Plus certification. This is the additional certification in addition to Energy Star to meet zero energy ready homes. This certification is offered by the EPA, and it's focused on indoor air quality from design throughout completion. The certification process is similar to Energy Star and zero energy ready homes, where you certify through a home certification organization or multifamily review organization. The requirements are based on climate as well as mandatory requirements. For example, climate-based requirements may be centered around radon mitigation or moisture control, whereas your mandatory requirements have to do with things like protecting your ductwork throughout install. So using a protection film to ensure that no debris or gypsum or sawdust end up in your HVAC systems when they're in operation. An additional mandatory requirement is no air handling equipment installed in garages, using low emission materials throughout construction like flooring, paint, and wood, ensuring that your central HVAC systems have a minimum MERV 8 filter, as well as including carbon monoxide alarms in each sleeping zone.
I just want to make a quick comment on the low emission materials. There are certain certifications that you'd be looking for that certify that they're low emission materials. But for the most part, many products already are meeting those requirements because they're mandated in California. So odds are most of the products you're already working with will meet those low emission materials requirements.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Okay, so additional testing and verification. So majority of the testing and verification requirements related to zero energy ready homes points to Energy Star. However, there are a couple items I wanted to touch on, that being the hot water rise test and water sense verification. The hot water rise test is when the rater or verifier confirms that the water temperature rises in 10 degrees Fahrenheit before 2 gallons are dispensed from the furthest fixture from the hot water heater. There also is a calculation method to this. Alternative method, it's a calculation method where you use the diameter of the piping and the length to calculate how much water is stored in that branch. And then lastly, the water sense verification. This is pretty much verifying on site that all of the plumbing fixtures installed are water sense labeled. Okay, so additional benefits and incentives. Well, although there are incremental cost increases of about $1,000 to $3,000 per unit, there are many state incentives or rebates that are available. Here in Massachusetts, we have Mass Save. They offer a rebate of $2,750 per unit if you certify under Energy Star Multifamily 1.2, as well as Zero Energy Ready Homes Multifamily version 2. And in addition to that, national incentives. I know Sean talked about some of the green financing options. As Energy Star was a Group 2 green building certification, Zero Energy Ready Homes is a Group 1, which offers a reduction in basis points of 15 to 20. And lastly, for those who are interested in going above and beyond, we have the Passive House certification through PHIUS. I wanted to bring this up because this program includes Energy Star Multifamily New Construction version 1.2, Zero Energy Ready Homes Multifamily version 2, and Indoor Air Plus. There are some additional design and testing and verification items. However, with this certification, you're looking at almost a guaranteed 45L eligibility, as well as, and I know I'm focusing a lot on Massachusetts. I'm located in Massachusetts, but Mass Save offers a $20,000 modeling reimbursement, as well as a $750 per unit rebate at design certification. And then finally, at final certification, you get $3,000 per unit. So the rebates here in Massachusetts definitely stack up for certifying Passive House through Passive House Institute or PHIUS. And for those of you who are interested in Passive House or PHIUS, mainly I'm a PHIUS verifier, so I kind of focus on that. But I will be hosting a webinar coming up next month. So stay tuned. Feel free to join that and learn more. Okay. What would persuade you most about getting Energy Star or Zero Energy Ready Homes? Be sure to answer in the chat box.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Ethan. So we're going to talk just a little bit briefly about a couple other items that if you're building a multifamily project, you should consider if you aren't already aware of it. So the first one is the 179D commercial energy efficient deduction. So it applies to any conditioned commercial building. So it could apply to a warehouse as long as the warehouse is being heated or cooled. But it also can include any residential buildings that are over 3 stories. The nice part about 179D is if you already have any existing buildings that you think would qualify for it, you don't need to amend to claim it. You can fill it out on a 3115 to claim those deductions. And like both Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Homes, it uses ASHRAE modeling. So it models particularly the HVAC, envelope, and lighting. You'll notice there's a range in the deduction amounts, and that's because the more efficient the buildings are, the more deduction you get. So for Pre-Inflation Reduction Act, that's 60 cents to $1.88 per square foot. For Post-Inflation Reduction Act, it's 54 cents to $1.16 per square foot. If you are not paying prevailing wage and if you don't have an apprenticeship program. So 179D requires an apprenticeship program be implemented on site in addition to the prevailing wage requirements. Post-Inflation Reduction Act, it's $2.68 and up to $5.81 per square foot if you are meeting those prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. In some cases, if it's a nonprofit or government entity that is trying to claim the deduction and they're not going to pay taxes, so they can't use it, The deduction can be allocated to the designers, so that could be the architect or potentially HVAC designers. That being said, it's somewhat legally fraught, and it's something you should 100% talk to an expert about before you go down that path. And then finally is the 48 and 48E investment tax credits. So those are applicable to all renewable or carbon neutral energy sources. So solar, wind, hydroelectric, fuel cells, thermal batteries, geothermal, all of them can qualify for the 48 and or 48E ITC. The credit amount is 30% of the total costs of installing the property if it's under 1 megawatt or is paying prevailing wage. So under a megawatt, you get the 30%. If it's over a megawatt and you're not paying prevailing wage, it drops down to 6%. There are also bonuses. So there's bonuses for low-income communities, low-income housing. There's a domestic content bonus. And then there's an energy community bonus, where energy communities are communities that have been affected by fossil fuel production. And with those bonuses, theoretically, it's not very likely, but theoretically, you could get a credit amount of 70% of the entire costs of the carbon neutral energy source. More commonly, we see low-tech housing projects are able to get 50% back as a tax credit. So that's pretty good. Also, a nice part about this is that the credit is transferable, so it is sellable on tertiary markets. And with that, we're going to answer some of the questions you guys have posted in the Q&A here. All right. I'm having trouble seeing it. Ethan, can you see the Q&A on your end?
Yes. Connor asks, I know this is going to address the elephant in the room, but Connor asks, do you have any thoughts about the potential for the 45L to end based off of the most recent budget proposal from the House of Representatives?
Yeah, I can actually speak to that a little bit. Nobody has said anything specifically about 45L publicly about it, but several senators have gone on saying, have come out saying these tax credit cuts are too much too quickly. So I think once it passes the House and it goes to the Senate, we're going to see significant language change there. Similarly, there's language phasing out the investment tax credit by 2032. I think a lot of that is going to change once this version gets to the Senate. I don't foresee it to be the drastic at the end of this year. It's going to end. I foresee, if anything, there's going to be a phase out over the next couple of years as worst case scenario.
Cool. Darian asks, can you all speak a little bit about projects which begin development/construction under one set of requirements, but delivers after the requirements have been refreshed to the most recent version?
Yeah. So for 45L, there is no leeway on it when it comes to Energy Star. So they actually wrote into the IRS notice following it up that, buildings starting in, being completed and occupied in 2025 need to meet version 3.2 for the single family program, which means you would have had to plan for it, a year or two in advance. Luckily, they didn't do that for zero energy ready homes. So which version of zero energy ready homes is just based on your permit date and nothing else. But that is why it is pretty helpful to talk to somebody who's familiar with the 45L tax credit rather than just a regular kind of smaller rater company to know which version you're going to have to hit to qualify for the tax credit.
Awesome. Connor also asks, do you test/inspect single family dwelling units?
Yes, that's the answer.
Cool. Yeah, I think we were just focusing on multifamily here, but if you guys are interested in a single family presentation, we can put one together. Definitely. Haley asks, is there a situation where a passive house building couldn't be eligible for 45L? So I can answer this one. So earlier, Sean had mentioned with the Energy Star program, if over 50% of the conditioned floor area is commercial space, that building would not be eligible for Energy Star, which then in turn, that building wouldn't get Energy Star certified, which would be a requirement for 45L. So if that building got Passive House certified, it wouldn't have the core 45L required certifications to claim 45L. And sorry, and Connor also asked, do you ever go through the Track A HVAC grading method? So usually we go through the Track B using a functional testing agent. We have professional engineers here on our team. So we are trained in 310. However, we kind of rely on the professional engineers to take care of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, the way I would answer that question is not if I can help it. It's a pretty arduous testing process, and it's better to rely on people who are more qualified than we are on doing it.
I agree with that. Let's see, I just want to make sure I'm hitting all these. And Connor also asks, who are the home certification organizations and who are the multifamily review organizations?
I can take that, or you can, if you like.
I was going to say, well, in my experience, I've worked with, we use the Bear Building Energy Resources as our provider, who operate as a home certification organization provider as well as multifamily review organizations, but not all home certification organizations are multifamily review organizations. I think we're just kind of lucky with our provider that they're able to take care of both scenarios. Sean, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, just like that a little bit. So the home certification organizations are who creates the actual kind of system for creating the rules that these are all under. So we mentioned a lot like HERS and HERS ratings. That's done by ResNet, and in that case, they're the HCO. They've been kind of the primary one, but recently there's been another one, Building Science Institute, which I believe is based out of Texas, has been up and coming and gaining a lot of traction. And then the Cheers, which I think used to be CalCerts, and they merged, or maybe they were separate and then merged. But Cheers in California is the other HCO. Whereas multifamily review organizations tend to be providers under those HCOs. So, for example, Ethan mentioned the Bear. The Bear is a provider under HERS, under ResNet HCO. So, a little convoluted, but hopefully that clarifies things.
Thanks, Sean. And Sam asks, is this only for ongoing/future projects? Are completed projects not able to get certified after completion? So I would say for ongoing or projects in design or early enough where we can get in the mandatory inspections and complete the required energy modeling and documentation. I do not believe it's possible to retroactively certify a completed building, as you would have to pretty much remove drywall or kind of work backwards to ensure that certification. If you have an occupied building, you would have to possibly move tenants or accommodate for inspections and testing. So I would say no, it's only for projects in future projects or projects in design. But I think that is all of the questions. Oh, whoops. Oh, sorry. There's actually some coming in the chat box. Let me switch over there. John says single family presentation would be great. Yeah, we can definitely do that. William states, do you have a commissioning agent staff or work with commissioning firms with a commissioning staff? I think it would be project specific for that. Oftentimes, or at least in previous projects, I've been looped in with commissioning agents from other companies, and we work together. They handle the startup and commissioning, and we kind of collaborate on different inspections and site visits around HVAC testing or ventilation testing. We do have professional engineers that can do functional testing, but in terms of entire building startup, that would most likely be a commissioning agent, I'd say. Cool. I think that is all the questions. Yeah, I don't see any more, but thank you guys for joining. There was a lot of good questions here, and some of them definitely had me thinking. And if there are any more questions, I'm sure my contact information will be distributed. So I'd love to jump on a phone call with any one of you guys and kind of break down the program a little bit more. And
yeah, I guess we should mention the way we operate our service is that we'll do a free initial model and review for you guys to see where you are, in the energy modeling process, how far or close you are to hitting it, that sort of thing. And if you are interested in Passive House, you should definitely come next month. Ethan's going to go do a deep dive on the PHIUS programs and all of the requirements and incentives out there for that. All right. Well, thank you guys all for coming, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.